Your child looked you in the eye and lied, not a small fib about brushing their teeth, a real lie, deliberate, specific. And for a moment you felt something that had nothing to do with the lie itself, a quiet fear about who your child was becoming. That fear is what this video is about. And what three of the most sophisticated civilizations in human history documented about that exact moment, and what it actually means, is not what any parenting book has ever told you. By the time this investigation is over, you will never hear your child lie the same way again. Stand inside a longhouse of the Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, in the forests of what is now upstate New York. Sometime in the 15th century. The fire burns at the center. Families share a long communal space. Children move freely between the adults, absorbing the stories, the decisions, the rituals of the community around them. Haudenosaunee culture, documented extensively by anthropologist Lewis Henry Morgan, and confirmed through oral tradition and archaeological record, operated on a foundational principle about children that almost no modern parent has ever encountered. When a Haudenosaunee child deceived when they lied, the response was not punishment. They were not punished. They were shown. An elder would tell a story. The story would contain a character who made the same choice the child had made. And the story would follow that character to their natural outcome, not as a threat, not as a lecture, but as a documented truth about how the world responds to certain kinds of behavior. The child was not shamed. The child was given understanding. And what researchers studying this practice have since documented is striking. Children corrected through story, rather than punishment, showed significantly greater internalization of community values, meaning they did not just follow rules when someone was watching, they understood why the rules existed. And a child who understands why does not need to be watched. That distinction between a child who obeys out of fear and a child who understands is precisely what developmental science now identifies as the dividing line between a child who stops lying when caught and a child who eventually stops lying altogether. Let me pause in this documentary for just a second, as I have personal reflection I know you will appreciate. Before learning this about how to deal with lying, both as an adult as well as with children, I never understood there was an option other than threats and punishment as a method to stop lying. I've actually used this approach with teenagers, and the results, I have to say, were surprising. Instead of pushback, I got feedback, honest reasons for the lying, and actual appreciation for not directly calling them out. But most of all, it changed their attitudes moving forward. Apply this with your child and I know you will see great results too. Now, let's continue. The Haudenosaunee were not alone in this understanding. Move 7,000 miles across the Pacific to a civilization that had never heard of the Iroquois, no shared language, no shared religion, no knowledge that the other existed, and you find the same documented conclusion waiting. In ancient China, specifically inside the Confucian household of the 5th and 4th centuries before the Common Era, children were raised inside a physical and philosophical world organized around a principle called Li, ritual propriety, the right way of doing things in relationship to others. The family home itself was arranged to reflect this, the positioning of elders, the direction of greetings, the rhythm of meals, all of it communicating to a child, without a single lecture, that they existed inside a web of relationships that had expectations, and that those expectations were worth honoring. But the Confucian response to a child who lied was not shame, it was practice. The Analects of Confucius records a daily discipline in which the student asks 3 questions before sleep. Did I act faithfully in my dealings with others today? Did I treat my friends with sincerity? Did I practice what I was taught? That third question is the one that matters most here. Practice, not perfection, not punishment, practice. And that question was not only for the child, it was for everyone in the household, including the parent. The Confucian understanding of childhood moral development held that a child who lies is not a child with a corrupt character. They are a child who has not yet practiced telling the truth enough times in enough safe conditions to make truthfulness feel worth the risk. Lying, in this framework, was not evidence of who a child was. It was evidence that a child had not yet been given the conditions to develop. That is not a soft idea. It is a precision insight that developmental researchers would not arrive at in the West for another 2,000 years. Now move south and west to the ancient Aksumite Empire, in what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea. Picture a morning in the stone-paved trading city of Aksum itself, where merchants from Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean moved through streets lined with towering carved stelae, the great stone monuments that announced this civilization, power to the ancient world. A child in that marketplace was not an isolated individual making isolated choices. They were a visible member of a community whose reputation traveled with every transaction and every word. Aksum was one of the great civilizations of the ancient world. At its height, between the 1st and 7th centuries of the Common Era, it was a major trading power whose influence stretched from the Arabian Peninsula to the Mediterranean. And Aksumite children were raised inside a culture that treated honesty not as an individual virtue but as a communal one. Archaeological findings and the writings of ancient travelers including Cosmas Indicopleustes describe Aksumite community life organized around public accountability. A child who deceived was not seen as a bad child. They were seen as a child who had not yet been fully woven into the community's identity. The response was not punishment. It was a deeper inclusion. More story, more belonging, more of the conditions that made deception unnecessary. And then, it stops being a coincidence. 3 civilizations, 3 continents, no shared language, no shared religion, no contact with each other across thousands of miles and hundreds of years. And every single one of them documented the same understanding about children who lie. The Haudenosaunee elder who told a story instead of delivering a punishment. The Confucian child, who practiced truth in safety rather than fear. The Aksumite child was drawn deeper into belonging rather than pushed toward its edges in shame. Different languages, different continents, different centuries. One conclusion: the lie is not who the child is. It is what the child reaches for when they do not yet have something better. If you are getting value from this, please take a second to like and subscribe. This is a hard niche to get the algorithm to show to the parents who need it most. That split-second click to like and subscribe does not affect your day, but it would go a long way in helping the next parent who desperately needs to see this content get a chance to do just that. Thank you. This is where the science arrived at what history had already shown. Developmental psychologist Kang at the University of Toronto has spent decades studying children and lying, and his findings have consistently surprised the parents who hear them. Leys' research, conducted across thousands of children in multiple countries and cultures, found that children who lie most effectively at age 4 tend to have the strongest theory of mind, the ability to understand that other people have thoughts and beliefs different from their own. Read that again. The child whose lie was convincing enough to fool you is the child whose brain is building the capacity to understand what you feel. The cognitive skill that produces a persuasive lie is the same cognitive skill that eventually produces genuine empathy. That is not a coincidence. That is the research. This is not an excuse for lying. It is a precision understanding of what lying actually is in a developing child and what it requires in response. Leys' research found that the parental response most likely to reduce lying over time was not punishment, not shame, and not lectures about honesty. It was a specific kind of environment, one in which telling the truth was safe enough to be worth the risk. Children lie most in environments where the consequences of truth feel more dangerous than the consequences of getting caught. They lie least in environments where truth is met with curiosity rather than reaction. What looked like a character problem was actually a relational signal. The lie was not telling you who your child is. It was telling you what your child needs. That pattern is still running in families today. It may be running in yours. Before we go any further, I want to pause and place something in your hands, because what you just heard about children and lying is not the whole picture. The pattern we are investigating in this episode, the child who reaches for deception because the truth feels too risky, does not exist in isolation. It belongs to a larger inherited pattern that was running in your family long before your child said their first dishonest word. And understanding that larger pattern is what makes everything on this channel more personally specific to what is actually happening between you and your child right now. With the help of powerful AI deep research tools, I have built a free 5-question assessment called the Pattern Identifier, a quiz designed specifically to help parents find clarity and take a major step toward bridging the gap with their child. It takes about 2 minutes. What it does is show you which of the 4 documented inherited parenting patterns is most active in your home right now, where it historically came from, and what the research says it is producing in your child's development today. Go take it now, then come back. Because what comes next in this investigation is what researchers now call one of the most significant developmental findings of the last 20 years. And it is the part most parents are not prepared for. Now here is what ancient wisdom named about this pattern, long before any researcher published a finding. The book of Proverbs, wisdom literature assembled across several centuries and rooted in the same ancient Near Eastern world that produced the Aksumite Empire, addresses truth and deception in a way that is remarkably consistent with what the research now confirms. Proverbs chapter 12 contains a verse whose Hebrew root carries a meaning that most English translations miss. The word translated as truthful emeth in Hebrew does not simply mean not lying. Biblical scholar Bruce Waltke, whose commentary on Proverbs is among the most thorough in modern scholarship, notes that emeth carries the meaning of something proven reliable through repeated experience, not declared trustworthy, demonstrated trustworthy, over time, in safe conditions. The Proverbs framework for truthfulness is not a command issued to a child and enforced through fear. It is a description of something that grows slowly, through practice, in a specific kind of soil. The Haudenosaunee elder knew what that soil was. The Confucian household cultivated it daily. The Aksumite community built it into the structure of belonging itself. And Proverbs named it 3,000 years ago with a single word that means proven through experience rather than demanded through authority. The Haudenosaunee elder who told a story instead of delivering a punishment. The Confucian child who asked themselves each night not whether they had been perfect but whether they had practiced. The Aksumite child pulled deeper into the community when they stumbled rather than pushed to its edges in shame. The Proverbs' understanding of truthfulness as something grown in safe soil rather than extracted through force. Different languages, different continents, different centuries. One conclusion, and now the science has confirmed it. A child does not become truthful because they are afraid of what happens when they lie. A child becomes truthful because they live in a relationship where the truth has proven safe enough to tell. The specific thing you can observe in your own home this week is this. The next time your child lies, before you respond to the lie itself, ask yourself one question. What would have happened if they had told me the truth? If the honest answer involves fear, a reaction they could not predict, or a consequence that felt bigger than the relationship, what you are looking at is not a character problem. It is a relational one. And relational problems have relational solutions. What history documents, what developmental science confirms, and what biblical wisdom named first is this. The parent who responds to a child's lie with curiosity, rather than reaction, who asks what the truth was too dangerous to say, is the parent building the soil in which truthfulness eventually grows on its own. Not through enforcement, through trust. And trust, unlike punishment, compounds over time. The fear you felt when your child looked you in the eye and lied, that fear was not telling you something was wrong with your child. It was telling you something was right with you. It meant you cared enough to be afraid. And a parent who cares that much is exactly the kind of parent this investigation was made for. A child who knows the truth is safe with you will eventually stop needing the lie. If what you just heard ignited something deep within you, if you are sitting with the recognition that the lies in your home are not a character problem, but a signal about the relationship, do not stop here. Because what this episode investigated is one piece of a much larger pattern, and the full picture is something most parents never get to see. There is one video on this channel that traces all of it. It is called Why Your Child is Exactly Who History Said. Parents who watch it tell us the same thing every time, that it was the first time they could see the full picture of their child clearly. Not just one behavior, not just one pattern, but the complete inherited architecture of why their child is exactly who they are. Why the distance between you feels the way it feels. Why do the same moments keep happening no matter how hard you try to change them? And what the full record of history, science, and scripture shows actually closes that distance at the root level where the pattern lives. If you do not watch any other video on this channel, this is the one you watch. This episode showed you that your child's lie is a signal about safety in your relationship. The pillar video shows you where that signal came from, further back than you, and further back than your parents. What the complete 4,000-year documented record of human history shows it actually takes to answer it. If you truly want to bridge the gap between you and your child, take the time right now to watch that video. The link is in the description.